What's happening?
Dragons. It is difficult to think of something more iconic, more widespread, and more cherished than dragons. Across the world, beings that can be recognized as dragons appear often with similar appearances and characteristics. Today they are featured in fantasy and games from Dungeons and Dragons to Skyrim, Dragon Age, Dragon Ball, Dragonlance, the list goes on. They are absolutely ubiquitous. We love the dragon as an enemy, a challenge, as a strange and magical creature, even as an ally. There is something truly captivating about the dragon, and its varied depiction in fantasy is equaled by its varied, yet connected depiction in real mythology. Why is it found across so much of the world, and why does it still haunt and fascinate us so much? Join me as I set out on a quest, delving into the deepest, darkest caverns of mythology to discover what is the dragon. Hi friends, I'm Kevin McLean. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and consider supporting me through Patreon or PayPal. Much thanks to all of my supporters. What does the name dragon mean? This would be the most important place to start, for nearly all names had a meaning at one point. It begins often as a descriptive term for the thing being referred to, and can tell us a lot about what people thought about it in ancient times. The word dragon is of Greek origin, adopted into Latin, and then spread throughout the European languages from Latin or directly from Greek. It comes from the word derkume, meaning to see, giving dragon the meaning of the one who stares, potentially related to the serpent whose eyes are always open. Before the adoption of the Greek word, other words were used in various Indo-European languages to refer to the same type of creature. Invariably, this word referred to a serpent or snake. In Scottish Gaelic, nahir sciach, meaning flying snake, actually means dragon. Nahir is from Proto-Celtic natrix, cognate with English adder, from an Indo-European root meaning snake. In Russian, the word is zmyi, also referring to a dragon, serpent, or snake generally. In Persian, dragon is azdah, and in Sanskrit it is ahi. Greek it is ophis. All of these are from the same Indo-European root, referring to a snake or serpent. So it's very clear that the original conception of the dragon was as a serpent or snake-like creature, which does not differ from the Asian representation. The earliest European depictions are in agreement with this. The notion that dragons have robust bodies seems to come from a medieval conflation of different symbols. Early Greek depictions of dragons show them as serpents. However, there are very strong similarities in the conception and attributes with another civilization. The earliest clear depictions of dragons do not come from Mesopotamia, but far to the northeast, in the region known now as Inner Mongolia in China. The Hongshan culture created many unique artifacts dating approximately between 4700 and 3000 BC. Some of these artifacts are recognizable as dragons. Dragons are, after all, the premier mythological creatures of China. But this places their existence in a recognizable form thousands of years before the first Chinese emperors, in a region that was, in its earliest historical period, not under the control of the Han people, the majority ethnic group of China, but Manchu, distantly related to Turkic and Korean, and likely Japanese. Settlers from northern Asia that once dominated Mongolia, northeastern Russia, and likely they crossed the waters to Japan, bringing not only their language, but the roots of their mythology. By at least 2000 BC, the dragon was already a very important symbol to the Han people, soon becoming one of the most dominant features of Han Chinese royal power, and a symbol of the king or emperor. In Chinese, Mongolian, Turkic, and Japanese myth, the dragon is closely linked to the waters. It is thought to fly in the clouds and cause rain, to manage rivers and waters beneath the earth as well. In Mandarin Chinese, the dragon is called Long, which some speculate may be a word derived from the sound of thunder. The emperor was closely aligned with the dragon, and they represented the young masculine force of cosmic power. Shenlong, meaning spirit dragon or god dragon, is a master of storms and rains. Tianlong, meaning heavenly dragon, was located around the North Star, the constellation Draco, and he was thought to guard that location, which is also the location of the residence of the supreme god, as well as the ancestors. They possessed great knowledge and magical power, are able to transform and take many shapes. This Asian conception of the helpful dragon is often contrasted with the European dragon-slaying myth, but are they truly as different as they have often been made out to be? The earliest reference to a dragon in Indo-European myth is found in the Rig Veda, dated to approximately 1600 BC. There, Vritra, the chief enemy of Indra, the thunder god, is described as a serpent or snake. Vrtra's mother was Danu. Though interpreted in Vedic myth as the mother of demons, her name simply refers to water or rivers, cognate with the Danube and Don rivers, and a word for river in Old Persian. She is in origin a primordial goddess of flowing waters, and her son, Vritra, the guardian of those waters. He has hoarded the waters, and it is Indra who must defeat him. One common misunderstanding, however, is that Vritra resides in the earth and is struck by Indra when the lightning bolt is cast down to the ground. However, the poems are clear that Vritra resides in the dark clouds themselves, and is thus at least partially aerial in nature. The strike of Indra against Vritra creates a spark, which is then seen as lightning, but the blow is against the clouds, not the earth. The bolt in this context is like a spark that flies from the iron under the hammer blow of the smith, perhaps why in Norse myth Thor wields a hammer. Vritra too is said to thunder, and the notion of dragons breathing fire may come from lightning. Vritra the dragon resides within the clouds, but he refuses to let loose the rains. Whereas in Chinese myth, the dragon is petitioned to release the rain. In Indo-European tradition, the dragon slayer was called on to defeat the dragon withholding the rain. With his strike, he would split open the cloud, the body of the dragon, and release the waters upon the earth, casting the dragon down into the earth and the rivers along with the rains. And it's even possible that the rains were interpreted as the blood of the dragon, something that we might see a reflection of in a Germanic example we will look at shortly. The next oldest depiction in Indo-European myth of dragons is from Greek tales and art of the Archaic period. Greek is the origin for the word dragon after all, but they likewise called dragons serpents and conceived of them as large snakes. Often dragons in Greek myths spit or breathe poison, though some also breathed fire. Their noxious fumes were thought to kill off plants and animals in the areas that they resided. The most famous and powerful of the Greek dragons was Typhon or typhoeus. His name may relate to a whirlwind, Typhon or smoke. Hesiod calls him the son of earth and Tartarus, and describes him as a dragon having 100 snakeheads coming from his shoulders, which flashed fire from their glaring eyes. An account which seems similar to Persian descriptions of a main oppositional dragon. Some accounts say he breathed fire, and that he was so large that his head touched the stars. He's often described and depicted as being at least partially humanoid, but the serpent element is critical to his identity. He is mentioned only briefly by Homer, but Hesiod tells of an epic battle that took place between the dragon and Zeus. The fire, heat, wind, thunder, and lightning generated from their battle turned the oceans hot. In some accounts, all the other gods fled the battle, and Zeus was at first defeated. Typhoeus stripped him of his tendons and his thunderbolt, and locked him in a cave, from which Hermes had to rescue him. Then, as Hesiod describes, "So when Zeus had raised up his might and seized in his arms thunder and lightning and lurid thunderbolt, he leapt from Olympus and struck him, and burned all the marvelous heads of the monster about him. But when Zeus had conquered him, and lashed him with strokes, Typhoeus was hurled down a maimed wreck, so that the huge earth groaned, and flame shot forth from the thunder-stricken lord in the dim, rugged glens of the mount, when he was smitten. A great part of the huge earth was scorched by the terrible vapor, and melted as tin melts when heated by men's art in channeled crucibles, or as iron, which is hardest of all things, is shortened by glowing fire in mountain glens, and melts in the divine earth through the strength of Hephaestus. Even so, then, the earth melted in the glow of the blazing fire." Typhoeus was the father of the unexpected and deadly storm winds. After his defeat, he was locked away under the earth, and most believed he was sealed beneath Mount Etna, the volcano, or other volcanoes, and was the cause of the fire beneath the earth and the eruptions of mountains. That Typhoeus and his battle with Zeus is described as a massive thunderstorm puts him in line with the Vedic conception of Vritra as the water-withholding serpent in the clouds, who is then cast down when the clouds are broken by the thunderbolt. Zeus obtained mastery over the weather and brought order by defeating the dragon. He then sealed this chaotic force beneath the earth, and it's an element found in Celtic, Norse, and Iranian myth. Another famous dragon of Greek myth is Ladon. Most famously, he was the dragon who guarded the apples of the Hesperides, often pictured wound round the apple tree. Heracles is sometimes said to have slain him when on his quest to obtain the apples. However, less acknowledged is that Ladon is also the name of a river in Arcadia, and the god of that river was the father of Daphne, who he turns into a laurel tree to save her from Apollo, a god likewise connected to dragon slaying. The two are very likely the same, and again preserves the connection between the dragon and the waters. The Lernaean Hydra, slain by Heracles, resided in a swamp. When the dragon Python was slain by Apollo, a spring burst forth from the earth, creating a river. Even the dragon of Colchis, son of Typhoeus, which guarded the golden fleece, is linked to water. It is sometimes said that the golden ram was a son of Poseidon and a nymph. It was brought away by Nephele, the cloud nymph, whose name means cloud, and it causes a great drought when she leaves for Colchis, spurned by her mortal husband. Retrieving the golden fleece is then connected to retrieving the rains, which the serpent guards. But one of the most interesting serpent figures in Greek myth is one of the most often overlooked, namely the Titan god Oceanus. The name Oceanus means to lie upon, related to Proto-Indo-European Okeimino, meaning to lie on. As one can expect in our current age, the most promoted theory is that the name is borrowed from some non-Indo-European language, even when there is a very plausible Indo-European etymology, and one of the Vedic dragon Vritra's attributes in Sanskrit is asayana, which may well be cognate with Oceanus. Oceanus is in the earliest depictions shown as a serpent, and has even a serpent in his hand, although he often is depicted with a humanoid upper body. Originally he was the serpent or dragon that encircled the earth, and rules over all the world's fresh waters, and together and through their children, the Oceanid nymphs, they distribute the waters to rivers, wells, and clouds, but are also closely connected to various mental attributes or states. In an Orphic myth, he seems to have been known as Ophion, ruling over heaven after Uranos, but was defeated in battle by Kronos and cast into the sea. The name Ophion means serpent. In Slavic myth, there are various different dragon figures. In Russian, the dragon is often called Zmyi, Sometimes these dragons take on human-like forms in folklore, like the Zmui Bogatyr, the hero serpent. Another is the Chuda Yoda, who has multiple heads which it can grow back, like the Greek Lernaean Hydra. It is a guardian of the waters of life and death, and dwells in the waters. Again, like other Indo-European myths, a hero associated with storms slays the dragon. The tale of Ivan, the cow's son, who is also called the Storm Bogatyr, or Storm Hero, is one of 3 twin brothers born from a cow, something with many Indo-European parallels. He uses a club and a magical sword, and with his club primarily, he slays several dragons. In Romania, there is a type of dragon called the Balor. It is an evil weather-controlling serpent that flies through the clouds and abducts women. The etymology of the Balor is uncertain, but I suggest that it is cognate with Gaelic Balor, one of the leaders of the Fomorians who opposed the gods, which may also suggest that in origin, the rather humanized Balor figure in Christianized Gaelic myth may have at one time been a dragon, as many of the main oppositional forces in Indo-European myths are. Ultimately, both may have related to the name Bellerophontes, the Greek hero whose name means Slayer of Belleros, which may have been an ancient name for a deadly monster or dragon shared between Greek and Celtic myth. Many of the dragons and dragon slayers in Slavic regions, and indeed in much of Europe, became associated with St. George and the dragon. The Balor, like many other dragons, is associated with stealing and devouring women. But why? It may relate to the deity of the waters being a goddess. The dragon, seen as the one who traps away the life-giving waters, is imprisoning the goddess. It is up to the hero to save her, freeing her, which amounts to releasing those waters. In folklore, this myth often takes on a life of its own, but the earliest representations of it is in the Rig Veda, where the dragon Vritra captures Appas, or Appa, the goddess of waters. In Gaelic myth, Balor steals away a great milk-producing cow, which may be a double of Boin, a name meaning white cow, the name of the river goddess, and ultimately a local name for the Proto-Celtic Danube, for which the Danube and Don and many other European rivers are named. The theme of the dragon capturing the Maiden likely has its origin in this specific myth relating to the capturing of the waters. There are a number of dragons in Germanic myth as well. The old Germanic word for dragon is worm, found in the name Midgardsormr, and used to describe dragons in the Old English tale Beowulf. When Grendel's mother is sought out in the lake, it is said, "The troop were all seated. They saw along the water then many a serpent, mere dragons, wondrous, trying the waters, knickers a-laying, on the cliffs of the nesses, which at noonday full often go on the sea deeps, their sorrowful journey, wild beasts and worm-kind." The dragon that Beowulf faces lies in a barrow right beside the sea, with a stream coming forth from it. He breathed flame, flew through the air by night, and guarded a great hoard of treasure. When Beowulf goes to seek the dragon, it says he saw a brook from the barrow bubbling out thenceward. The flood of the fountain was fuming with war flame. So although the dragon is not specifically said to control waters, he is nonetheless linked to them, and we might wonder if his fiery breath that burns down buildings is lightning. Beowulf and Wiglaf defeat the dragon, but Beowulf succumbs to his wounds, specifically poison, and dies, not unlike Thor, who dies after defeating Jormungandr. When they come at the end to collect the treasure of the hoard, the dead dragon is cast down into the sea, letting the waves and currents of the waters entwine him. In Norse myth, Jormungandr, the giant monster, also called the Midgardsormr, meaning world serpent or worm, is in ways a similar figure to Oceanus. He is a giant serpent who encircles the world, residing within the waters. He is the offspring of Loki, and a sibling to Fenrir and Hel. Like in the Greek myth, Midgardsormr is associated with poison, which ends up fatal for Thor. In the Himiskvida, translated by Jackson Crawford, who likewise has an excellent YouTube channel, it says, Thor, friend of humans, enemy of the serpent, put the ox's head on his hook. Then the gaping Midgard serpent came up, the one that hates the gods, and lives in the encircling sea. This encircling sea would appear to be the same encircling sea of Greek myth, namely Oceanus. It continues. The bold Thor pulled bravely to bring that poison-slick serpent up on board. With his hammer he struck a blow on the head of Fenrir's serpent brother. The monster howled, volcanoes erupted, and the old earth trembled all over, but that sea monster sank back into the waves. In another myth, Thor is tricked into trying to lift the serpent, disguised through magic as a cat. He manages to get a paw off the ground, and it's revealed later that had he actually lifted the serpent, it would have altered the nature of the earth itself, likely because he represents the boundaries of the earth. In Gaelic myth, there appears to have been a similar notion. In the tale Da Derga's Hostel, it is said, I know nothing like it, unless it be the earth that has broken, or the leviathan that surrounds the globe, and strikes with its tail to overturn the world, or the ship of the sons of Don Dessa that has reached the shore. Though the biblical name of Leviathan is used, the description is akin to Oceanus and Jormungandr. There are also Iron Age artifacts which appear to depict this dragon as one biting its own tail. And of course the Semitic myths about Leviathan are also very similar in many respects, in that the dragon is again linked to the waters. Sigurd was the most famous dragon slayer in Norse myth. He fought and killed Fafnir, a dwarf who is transformed into a dragon by a cursed ring obtained through his greed. Like many other dragons, he had poisoned breath which ruined the land, and obsessively guards his treasure. Fafnir means the embracer, and perhaps implies constriction or restraint, which is a theme common among Indo-European dragons. In order to kill the dragon, a trench is dug so that he can be stabbed from underneath. As he goes down to the water, Odin instructs the hero to dig more trenches to capture the blood of the dragon, so that he's not drowned by it. Again showing this connection to water and liquid, both in the ambush and in the death of the dragon. However, Sigurd also learns the speech of birds from tasting the blood of the dragon, and as birds convey prophecy, he is able to learn of events in the future. This is very similar to Welsh, Gaelic, and Slavic tales, where a hero tastes a particular magical salmon, which grants great knowledge, in the case of Welsh Taliesin and Gaelic Finn McCool. In the Slavic tale, The Maid with the Golden Hair, the hero, identified as George, is commanded to cook a special fish for the king, given to him by a strange old woman, which is said to grant him knowledge which others do not possess. He is ordered not to taste it, but he does anyway, and the servant, rather than the king, learns the language of animals. In the tale, the hero even remarks that the fish looks strange, almost like a reptile, perhaps hinting that at some point in the folktale the fish was in fact a dragon. These Welsh, Gaelic, Germanic, and Slavic stories are so similar that they must have had a common origin that links the consuming of a fish or dragon to acquiring its magical knowledge. Another dragon of Norse myth is Nidhogg. This serpent dwells beneath the roots of the Yggdrasil, gnawing at them. In the poem Grimnismal, it says that there are many serpents that dwell beneath the tree, Goin and Moin, Grabak and Grafoluth, Ofnir and Svafnir, sons of the snake, Grafvitnir, will always gnaw that tree's roots. It might be that Nidhogg and Grafvitnir are different names for the same dragon, In the Voluspa it says, I saw oathbreakers wading in those thick streams, and murderers, and those who seduce others' lovers. There, Nidhogg sucks the corpses of the fallen, snaps them in his jaws. The dragon punishes wicked people in hell, but those it punishes must wade through the waters where Nidhogg dwells, again linking the dragon to streams that flow beneath the earth. Nidhogg is also the last thing mentioned in the poem after the world begins a process of rejuvenation after Ragnarok. He comes flying down from the dark mountains, the corpses of the slain beneath his wings. It isn't clear exactly the meaning of this, but perhaps these corpses are to play some role in the regeneration of men who are brought up from hell and revived. This is pure speculation, of course, but there is a similar process in the Zoroastrian myths of the end times and the perfect period that will follow it. Persian myth is also of Indo-European origin and contains a basic structure very similar to that found in Norse legends. Azidahaka, or Zahak, means either huge serpent or fiery serpent, and is the son of Ahriman. He is said to have 3 heads and to spew poison. In medieval tales he is given a humanoid form, but Ahriman kissed both of his shoulders and serpents grew out of them in ways reminiscent of typhoeus in Greek myth, and also the origin of a character in the Tales of Destiny game, for those who know that. These dragons must be fed human brains every day. He is confronted by the god hero Thrittauna, a name derived from Vritra, the third man, cognate with a name for Odin. In medieval Persian tales he is called Feridun. Defeating the dragon in battle, he releases the 2 daughters of Jamshid. Yet because Zahak is so toxic when he is cut, his blood transformed into all the nasty and harmful creatures of the earth. Afraid the world would be overrun by monsters if he dealt him another blow, Feridun chains Zahak beneath Mount Damavand, like the Greek typhoeus or Norse Loki. Whenever there is an earthquake or volcanic eruption, it's said to be Zahak stirring beneath the earth. At the end times he will burst forth from his chains and lead the army of the Devas against the world, consuming 1/3 of all the people on earth. But the dragon-slaying hero Garsha, who is called the son of Vritra, is said to have been raised from the dead in order to defeat the dragon. The dragon is also found in Hittite myth, another Indo-European culture. There he is taken on by Tarhuna, whose name means to prevail, to conquer. The dragon is called Iruyanka, which comes from 2 different Indo-European words referring to eel and snake. At first, the dragon defeats Tarhuna, and the god must seek out aid from a goddess. She fools the dragon, providing large quantities of food and drink, which then put the dragon into a drunken state. Once drunk, the dragon is bound with a rope, and it is then that Tarhuna is able to overcome and defeat the dragon. In another version, Tarhuna is defeated by the dragon and has his eyes and heart removed. In order to defeat the dragon, the god has to marry a mortal woman and have a son by her, and his son then has to go on and marry the daughter of the dragon, and request that his father's eyes and heart be given to him as a wedding gift. Once restored, the god goes to face the dragon again, this time defeating him, and possibly killing his own son in the process. And this version of the myth has certain similarities also with the Greek myth about Zeus having his tendons removed after being defeated by typhoeus. But the first version cited is extremely interesting because it contains the core myth that is found in several other sources, such as the story of British Saint Samson, but also of Saint George, where the dragon must be first bound, in the case of Saint George, even bound by a female figure, before the dragon can be defeated, and the consumption of alcohol, which we see also in other examples in Celtic and Japanese myth. It is practically impossible that these similarities in structure and theme are accidental. They have to come from the same original source. Now, when researching this topic, I did run across a giant rabbit hole that we're not going to delve into the full depths of in this particular video because of the extent of it. But it pertains to Sumerian. That is, a language that was spoken in the region of Babylonia from about 3000 BC to 1800 BC, but continued to be used as a liturgical language until about 100 AD. Now, the Sumerian is thought to be the origin of the legends of Tiamat, that is, the dragoness, who in many ways parallels certain aspects of Greek and Indo-European mythology, in terms of the dragon's representation in relation to the waters, and in relation to being slain by some warrior god, often associated with the weather. Now, the Greeks called Tiamat Thalati, which basically is an Eastern Greek form of Thalasi, meaning the ocean or sea. And some have speculated that the name Tiamat is actually cognate with Tethys, the wife of Oceanus, in Greek myth. Now, this isn't as crazy an idea as it seems, because the husband of Tiamat is Abzu. Now, Ab means water in Sumerian, and Zu means deep. So deep, he's the deep water. And these are the two primordial figures, Tiamat and Abzu. Now, in Greek myth, in Homer specifically, in the Iliad, there is some indication that Tethys and Oceanus were thought by Homer to have been the ancestors of all the other gods. In fact, Hera says something to this effect. And that matches with the Sumerian depiction. Here's the thing. Sumerian belongs to an isolated language. We don't know what language family it belongs to. But it is a fact that Sumerian has many either loan words or original words from Indo-European. So some have speculated that it is a Creole language. It is a kind of fusion of the grammar of some sort of local language mixed with vocabulary of Indo-European. And Abzu is a very good example. The name of the god is exactly cognate with the Indo-European word used for water in many, many cases. It is an extremely well-attested Indo-European word. And what are the chances that you are going to have two completely unrelated languages that have the exact same word for water? It is extremely, extremely unlikely. But if this was the only example of a word that was obviously cognate, it would be one thing, but there are hundreds. And so the Sumerian mythology looks a lot like Greek mythology or other Indo-European mythologies, likely because it's coming from Indo-European mythology. And then all of the other mythologies that sort of spring off of that are later developments of it, Akkadian, Babylonian, and other Semitic mythologies, even things like the Hebrew mythologies, all of these come to be influenced by Sumerian mythology. Even things like Leviathan are thought to be reflections of Tiamat, the mythology of Tiamat. Some people have argued, oh look, this shows this huge influence coming from Semitic religions and going into the West, influencing the West. But actually it appears to be exactly the opposite. Obviously, this changes the way that one would think about the development in Mesopotamia in general. Because not only do we have Hittite coming in as a major Indo-European language and a major power player, but now Sumerian, at least very, very strongly influenced by Indo-European languages and culture. And so speakers of Indo-European languages must have been pressing southward at a very early stage, much earlier than some people have figured. But in Sumerian mythology, carried on by the later Akkadians, Tiamat spawns a whole bunch of dragon figures as her children, and then does battle with the gods, and is eventually slain. In later myths, she is slain by Marduk, seemingly first a god called Anu, and later Enlil. But this basic structure of the myth survived several different culture and linguistic changes. So it's very peculiar, because even incoming Semitic population that took over Sumerian still retained the Sumerian language in a liturgical sense, in a religious sense, so they maintained also the basic religious structures of the Sumerians, including their mythology, adopting it, making it their own, which to me in part suggests that they didn't really have a developed mythological or religious system, and they simply took on the one that the Sumerians had. And so when we see later dragons represented in Semitic myth, like Leviathan for instance, yes, that dragon does share a lot of characteristics with the Indo-European idea of a dragon, and probably that is because it is influenced by Tiamat, which is in origin Indo-European. But I will be doing a full video going into the depths and the implications of all of this at another time, because I am fully aware that it is highly controversial. In Gaelic and Brythonic myth, the dragon sometimes takes on a positive role. King Arthur is a son of Uther Pendragon, meaning the chief dragon. Dragon may be used here to refer to a powerful warrior, but we could also read this in a completely mythical sense, especially as Uther is shown in the earliest accounts to have magical and shape-shifting powers. Dragons are also used to represent the British and English people. The reason why the white dragon is a symbol of England, and the red dragon a symbol of Wales. In the tale of Llydd and Lleyelys, the two warring dragons are a blight to the land. Lleyelys says, "A dragon of foreign blood is fighting with him, your native dragon, and is seeking to overthrow him. Because of that, your dragon utters a horrible scream. Where you have discovered the exact center of the island, have that place dug up. Then have a vat of the best mead that can be made put into the hole, with a cover of silk brocade over the top of the vat. They will be seen fighting above it in the air in the form of horrible animals. Then finally in the form of dragons in the air. Then they will go into the vat of mead as pigs, and drink it all and fall asleep. Then they must be bound and buried in a stone chest and hid in the ground in a strong place." The oldest Celtic tale of serpents comes from a Roman writer, Pliny the Elder. He says that the Druids and Gauls believed in the magic power of a serpent stone. The stone was said to have been created by foam of many serpents coming together. It would have to be stolen by a man who would then need to flee across a river on horseback. A depiction of such a serpent may be present along Hadrian's Wall, where it takes a phallic form. A double-headed serpent also features on numerous coins from Iron Age Britain, where it rides upon a luminous ship along with two other twinned figures, sometimes opposite a lightning bolt or a great tree. The same double-headed serpent is found beside the face of a god from Gaul, and of course famously, the figure sometimes identified as Cernunnos is holding a snake. There are also various figures holding snakes in each hand. Some of these may be gods, some of them may be intended as druids. In Gaelic myth, Conall Cernach goes to confront a dragon that is holding a woman captive. Rather than battling the dragon, however, the dragon comes to him submissively and wraps itself around him as a protective belt. The life of Saint Samson of Britain contains perhaps the most clear representation of dragons in surviving Celtic myth. The tale dates to between 600 and 800 AD, and thus predates the tale of St. George and the dragon, even though it shares key similarities. Saint Samson comes across a dragon whose track through the forest is burnt ash, yet as the saint approaches, the serpent curls up and begins to bite its own tail. Then the saint makes a sign of a circle around the dragon and bids his friends to watch as he calls upon the serpent to now go about where it is permitted, and the serpent slithers about within the circle that the saint has drawn. The serpent is completely under the power of the saint, so much so that to kill it, he simply orders it to die, and it does. Then, after breaking up a pagan ritual that appears to have been dedicated to the god Lugh, headed by a chief named Gwydianos, certainly Gwydion from the Welsh myth, he is told there is a dragon which is destroying local towns, which something must be done about, apparently connected to the purpose of the ritual. He finds the dragon in a cave, but as he approaches it, the creature submits and begins to bite its tail. He binds the creature around the neck with his linen girdle, then casts it down, ordering it to die, and it does. However, we can see in this tale a clear link to binding, as it's effectively noosed and hung. After that, Samson takes up residence in the dragon's cave and causes it to gush with water, repeating the connection between the dragon and the liberation of waters. The saint's icon often features him with snakes, and his feast day is July 28, corresponding roughly to Lughnasadh. And of course, one of the most famous dragon myths in Europe is St. George and the dragon. The myth that connects the saint to this story has really nothing to do with the real saint. It is instead a myth copied from a pagan source and ascribed to the saint at a much later date, appearing no earlier than the 10th century. The saint became popularized in Britain likely because of its similarity to native tales. A dragon was destroying the land with his poisonous breath, but the locals were able to buy him off with tribute. It started with livestock, but eventually he demanded a maiden every year. The same pattern is found in many folktales and myths. Some have suggested it might relate to some earlier widespread cult of making sacrifices to dragon gods, in a similar way that dragons are worshipped in Asia. They displaced this practice and replaced it instead with a myth of killing the dragon rather than supplicating it. In any case, St. George wounds the dragon with a spear as it comes out of the lake, for like most dragons, it's dwelling in the water. He then tells the princess to put her belt around its neck, exactly like St. Samson does, and when she does, the dragon is able to be led around like a tamed animal. The saint then brings the dragon back to town, terrifying the people, and effectively blackmails them into converting to Christianity, saying that he would only slay the beast if they converted. Japanese dragons are likewise creatures of the water. Watatsumi, or Ryujin, is perhaps one of the most famous ones, who is a beneficent dragon and a master of the seas and waters. He is prayed to for rains by farmers and for safety at sea by fishermen. However, there was also Yamato no Orochi, the 8-branching serpent, who was slain by Susanoo, a complex god often connected to the seas, winds, and storms. The serpent was as large as 8 valleys, and would come every year to devour a young maiden from the Kunitsukami people. Susanoo gathered great amounts of alcohol, and when the dragon came, it drank the liquor and became drunk. When it fell asleep, the god chopped it up and took the woman who was its would-be meal as his wife. The drinking of the alcohol to subdue the dragon is oddly similar to the Welsh tale, and the placation of the dragon by offering a young maiden every year is also very similar to many European tales. There are too many dragons in Chinese myth to list here. Tianlong is the heavenly dragon, and a name for the constellation the Greeks named Draco, the dragon. It is thought to guard the North Star, which is of central importance in Chinese cosmology, being the center of heaven, the home of the ancestors, and also the king of the gods. Scorpio is also named Tianlong, and prayers and offerings were made to request rain. There is also Xianlong, meaning god dragon or spirit dragon, a bringer of storms, rains, and winds. Though there are also dragons that reside in the earth, the most prominent and important ones are linked to the waters, weathers, seas, and rivers. What I think all these examples show, from Ireland to Japan, is that there was in fact a common conception of the dragon in a very archaic period, likely in the Neolithic or even earlier, and that both European dragons and Asian dragons are fundamentally the same, though approached differently. In Asia, the dragons were and are prayed to as gods to bring rains and control waters, whereas in Indo-European myth, a hero god was often invoked to gain control over the dragon or slay the dragon in order to accomplish the same task, but the dragon in both cases is controlling the waters. This common conception might be as old as all of human mythology, but it also might have been fostered through cultural connections. When we say Proto-Indo-European, we're thinking of a specific time period in which the language family was thought to be relatively unified. But there is a pre-Indo-European stage as well, and many of those people who developed into those that we call Proto-Indo-Europeans came out of the Russian forest steppe, and that region was ultimately in close connection with the same people who would go on to become Mongolians, Japanese, Turkic, etc., forming the Altaic language groups. And so it is possible, through this very ancient Stone Age connection, that some of these myths, at least, that are shared between various East Asian myths and European myths, might have originated from the same source. They might have been shared myths in a pre-Proto-Indo-European stage. There are, of course, many people who try to provide rationalizations to dragon myths. Some have claimed that they are an explanation for dinosaur bones. I think this is highly unlikely. Dinosaur bones are generally not found as complete sets, nor would most of them easily conform to the most typical depiction of the dragon as a giant magical snake. This leads some to claim that the dragons are a result of humans' innate fear of snakes, but this again ignores the Asian interpretation, which sees them as mostly benevolent spirit beings, and also doesn't explain why they are specifically linked to waters. We have seen that a common Indo-European conception involved a serpent that encircled the entire earth, controlling the waters at its furthest boundaries. Ideas like this do not come from observing fossils, nor from a fear of snakes, nor does it appear to have anything to do with snakes' connection to health or the occult, which is another separate element. Some believe it was the existence of water snakes or crocodiles that inspired the dragon, but sea snakes are not represented in many of the geographical regions in which tales speak of sea and water controlling dragons. Many of these myths actually originated from people that were not really near any massive bodies of water, simply rivers and lakes. They also are found in northern mythologies, which are locations certainly not abundant in things like crocodiles. And of course, dragons are very, very often airborne creatures, or at least have the ability of flight, and are associated with rains and clouds, something obviously not associated with any such animal in existence. More likely, perhaps, is that there is some natural phenomena, cloud-based or water-related, that sparks a comparison with a serpent. For the Greeks, it was the staring eyes of the snake which gave the dragon its name. Waterspouts, whirlwinds, rainbows, cloud formations have all been given as possible origins, but we may never know with certainty. There might have been no rational cause for it at all, simply a fantastic story that caught on. But what does appear true is that the dragon did arise from a common conception across at least Europe and Asia, if not all the peoples of the world. And the Chinese and Japanese dragon is of the same origin as the dragons of Western Europe. Well, I hope you liked the video, and if you did, please like, subscribe, and consider supporting me through Patreon or PayPal. Thank you all, and as always, stand tall.